Welcome back. My name is Alex, and this is going to be a conversation today focusing on condominiums and condominiums alone. If you own a condominium, if you plan to buy a condominium, or if you plan to sell, I think all the points I'm going to mention are important. But first, let's take a step back. Now I'm going to show you the first condominium I bought. Right here, if you can see it, it's good focusing. There we go. So this is 135 Antibes. I bought this condo back in 2012. It was my first real estate purchase. I had no real estate license. I was working in a different profession. I was a financial analyst. And this seemed like all the money in the world. This was North York, Yonge and Finch area. 205,000 was just an absurd amount of money. Lo and behold, today you couldn't even buy half a condo with that kind of money in the same area. Now, a lot of things that I've heard over my profession from people who want to buy, who want to sell, are almost myths. Like a condo, if it's too old, you should be careful not buy it. Well, for example, this condo that I bought was built in 1971. When I bought it, it was already 41 years old. And it went through some major renovations. And the maintenance was quite decent all this time, and I was able to also do some renovations and pull a hefty amount of money out of that condominium. So it just goes to show it really all depends. And my plan today is to really sit down and talk to you guys about all the major points. Now, as a real estate agent, I think it's really important when we're giving any kind of advice, and please, as a full disclosure, this is not legal advice or financial advice. But this is something that I have learned over the number of transactions that I've done. And I think that this is meanwhile or worthwhile to share with everybody who is thinking about making any decisions with a condo. Now, I have in the past 5 years transacted over 100 transactions in the condominium, and in cumulative about 325 as of this year and for all real estate transactions. So I've learned a thing or two that I think is quite beneficial. Number one, you first have to understand the difference between freehold and condos. I think the easiest way to explain it is that freehold is a sole proprietorship. You are in charge, you want to fix the roof, you make a call, you fix the roof. When you own a condo, it's a corporation. There is a process set in place. What does that mean? That means that there's certain things you have to do in order to get things done. You have board of directors, things have to be voted on, there's certain protocol, and so forth. There's structure in the condominium corporation. In the freehold, you are the owner and you can do whatever you want within reason. Now, the biggest and most important thing that I think people don't fully realize when they're shopping for a condo is they typically have a top 4, top 5 list of price, location, layout, upgrades, maintenance, and so forth. The fifth one that should be on their list and is equally as important as the first 3 is the building's financial health. Because when you're buying a condo, the intention is you don't want to lose any money and you would be very happy if you made some money. However, if the building's financial health is not doing so well, and there's usually what we call orange flags and red flags that you need to be aware of in the buying process, you may have a really bad time when you go to sell. Now, let's break it down into the 5 most important things that I think you need to look out for when you're buying a condo, selling a condo, or even if you live in a condo, okay? Number 1, when you're buying a condo, you're not just buying your unit. You're buying the entire building, believe it or not. Why am I saying that? Well, because a building like a condo corporation, they collect essentially a monthly maintenance from you. That maintenance covers all of the expenses of that building, including the reserve fund, which they put aside in case there are any major repairs. So everybody's contributing to the effect of making sure the building is in good standing health. When you're buying that building, you want to make sure the building is in good health. This is important. Things like special assessment, which we're going to talk about a bit later on, are critical, and they should be a flag, an orange flag at the very least for you. Number 2, lease to ownership percentage. Now, most house certificates will always provide a certain number of how many people are leasing the property in the building versus how many owners. Now, this is my opinion. I prefer, if I'm buying a condo, that there are more owners than there are people who are leasing. The reason being is because less traffic, a lot less of a revolving door in that condo, and more than likely people who live there care about the building. Number 3, reserve fund. This is pretty simple. This is a major number that's in your status certificate, which essentially says this is how much money a building has in case something goes awfully wrong. Like the roof leaks, there needs repair in the garage, the windows are leaking and so forth. Now, this number fluctuates, and it's very important to really understand the life of the building and where it is in its life. If a building just got built, it's not gonna have millions of dollars. Usually the first 5 years of when the building starts to take out the major amount out of the maintenance in order to set aside for reserve fund. But typically, like we see in buildings, and it depends on how many units, but let's say average, between $1 million to $3 million. I recently listed a condo in Mississauga that had a $5 million reserve fund, which was also built in the 80s. So it all depends. Good management skills, good financial skills of that board, great reserve fund, very important. Number 4, this is gonna be a controversial topic, steady increases in your maintenance. Now, most of you who haven't had a condo probably don't understand this, and those of you who do have a condo understand this quite well. Listen, a building gets old. It needs constant repair. There's nothing wrong with that. But when the board specifically and explicitly decides not to increase your maintenance, you should not be celebrating. You should be knocking on some doors and figuring out why. Because a great process to making sure that the building is taking care of itself is the steady increase of 2 to 3 to 4% on an annual basis of the maintenance. This is critical. When we see a building hasn't increased maintenance in 5 years, the first thing I ask is, how old is it? Has there been an engineering study done on the roof, on the overall structural assessment? Is there anybody even alive at the board of directors making sure that the building is going to stand and not cause a potential special assessment for their owners? And this is an extreme situation that I'm mentioning, but believe me, when we see that a building has increased maintenance in 5 years, and we've seen it, it's usually strangely alarming. And number 5, the worst word that every lawyer and owner and agent hates to hear is special assessment. This essentially means that the building has used all of its or most of its reserve fund and doesn't have enough funds to continue repairing the building. What do? They come knocking on your door, asking you to contribute to the property. And this is a very unpleasant experience. Typically, this will refer to a building putting a lien on your property if you haven't paid the amount. And I've seen these amounts go between $30,000 to $100,000, okay? So these are my top 5 things. Now, I have a cheat sheet, I'm gonna flip it over. When you are buying your condo, as I mentioned, there's the top 4 or 5 things you're looking out for, like location, price, all the expenses associated with it. The way that the deals are structured in Ontario is that when you are buying your condo through agreement of purchase and sale, you have conditions for financing, inspection, status. Most of the time, financing and your inspection is about 5 business days. And at that point in time, the agent on the other side will order a status once the property is sold conditional, and the status takes up to 10 days to get to you, with 2 to 3 business days for your lawyer to review, making sure that everything is up to par. This is the part that's very important, because think about the process. So you've put a deposit on your property, you've done the inspection, you've done the financing, you're getting really excited. Here comes the status. It's a 100-page, even 200-page report in very fine writing, and this is essentially an important document that your lawyer, by the way, you have to have a good one, has to review and make sure that there's nothing out of the ordinary, that everything that's in the APS is also reflective in the status certificate. For example, things like your parking, your locker, your actual unit number. Is it accurate? Who are the owners? Do they owe any money in back funded maintenance and so forth? There's a lot of things you have to read through and make sure it's all up to par. But most importantly, in that document is the balance sheet, the income statement, the financial health of that building. Now, for most of you who can't read a balance sheet, that's fine. Your lawyer is going to typically do a fairly good enough job making sure that there's nothing alarming, that the building hasn't said that, hey guys, we're short $1 million, we're putting a special assessment into place. And that should be your first red flag to really consider if you're going to buy this building. Number two, you need to understand maintenance. Now, maintenance, for the most part, in a new building in the first 2 to 3 years is quite low. It's done to entice people to make sure that they buy, and they see a very low number and they get very excited. That number goes up pretty quickly. Now, the rules in Canada for those of you who own a condo is that management isn't really allowed to go above 10% without board approval and, of course, your approval. So whenever management increases the maintenance, they'll have to more than likely explain why. And when they explain why, you can dig in to find out more details, such as, was there a shortage? Have you guys been putting money away for the reserve fund and so forth? A lot of the times it's normal, but it's important to understand what's happening with your monthly maintenance. Number three, these are my favorite. These are my 3 R's: renos, repairs, and restructure. So renos are essentially things like new carpeting, new doors, new frames, new amenities. Repairs are major. They're usually, an asset type of spending, so it's a capital. So for example, a new roof. Now, believe it or not, flat roofs on condos are very expensive. $1 million doesn't go very far. Most condos have a very specific protocol that they follow to make sure that those big ticket items like roofs, windows are maintained, and they do an engineering study where they hire an outside third-party firm that comes in, takes a look at all the repairs that they have to do and gives them a decent quote, which they can go off of by. And then the building management with the board of directors has to figure out, okay, do we have enough reserve fund? How do we do this? How do we structure it? And so forth. This is really important. If you're buying a condo and they're about to do a huge repair, well, they're going to deplete a reserve fund. You want to know what is the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5 going to look like on the maintenance, because there's a good chance you're going to increase your maintenance above the usual. So keep that in mind. Now, restructure, what does that mean? A lot of the times, the building management isn't going to tell you all the dirt on the building when you're not an owner yet and you're not conditional process. I always like to go up to the building manager during the 10-day wait period for the status and ask a few questions and ask, how long has the board of directors been, an acting party? Have they been there for a long time? Or is there a current revolving door of a new board of directors? Because whenever I hear revolving door of board of directors, I'm usually apprehensive. Why is that happening? What I like to see personally is owners who are living in the building for a long time get involved in the building, because that typically shows that they care. Now, my perspective of all of Toronto and all the deals I've done is that there are a few bad apples. And then mind you, I've done deals on Jane and Finch, and some of the condos have been on the news in regards to having essentially no money to repair the building. The building is falling apart. And so I know what happens when things go bad. I also have been involved in transactions where the building is managed, or the board of directors are the sole owners of the unit, and they have professions such as engineers and lawyers, and they're very picky, they're very involved, and the building has fantastic maintenance for the square footage. Now, the one thing I'm going to leave you off with is that when you're buying a condo, the general rule of thumb has always been that for every square foot of your space that you're buying, you shouldn't be exceeding more than $1 per maintenance, unless your maintenance includes all the utilities. This is, generally speaking, a decent number that I go off of. So for example, if you're buying a 1,000 square foot condo, your maintenance should be about $1,000 if maintenance is included. Now, if you're going to be buying, for example, a condominium that has all the amenities, state-of-the-art, outside pool, inside pool, squash court, tennis court, gym, sauna, jacuzzi, beware, it's usually cheaper to just get a gym membership, because here's the thing about all those state-of-the-art amenities. As they get old, they get very expensive, and you end up paying for them whether you use them or not. I know some people, including my clients, like the convenience of going downstairs to swim in the pool, and I get that, that's all cool. But if you're buying your first condo and you're watching your expenses, be mindful of that. It might seem enticing at first, but in the end, it adds up. Thanks for listening, and if you guys have any comments or if I was any help, comment below. Have a great day. Take care. Peace.